This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV, it's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
I was never really a runner. The way I see running is a gift, especially when you have stage 4 cancer. I'm Anne. I'm running the Boston Marathon, presented by Bank of America. I run for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute to give people like me a chance to thrive in life, even with cancer.
Join Bank of America in helping Anne's cause. Give if you can at BofA.com/supportAnne. What would you like the power to do? References to charitable organizations is not an endorsement by Bank of America Corporation. Copyright 2025.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind a beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. I'm not sure if you did that deliberately, Kieran. That was a proper mid-70s go. That was fantastic. Almost like you were starting a Grand Prix there. It's how are you, Kieran?
I'm good. I've just been on a law panel with the GOAT himself, Nick DeMarco. Talking all things in the world of football law and finance, and I think everybody's saying the same thing. 10 years ago, to have 200 or 300 lawyers turn up to an event like that, and people from finance, nobody ever thought about it. It's a bonkers subject, but we seem to be in the middle of it.
Well, also, having 200, 300 lawyers together in the same room and none of them getting paid, Kieran, that must have made them quite itchy. I would have thought that would be a new experience for all of them. You're quite right, though, and I think it's partly our fault, unfortunately. Full exposure, Kieran. Full exposure? No, is that right? No, I don't think I mean that, do I? Certainly not in front of a room full of lawyers. I'll think of it's because it's late, Kieran. This is our news pod, our Thursday pod, but for various logistical reasons, we're having to record this on a Tuesday night. And I can tell you exactly what time it is on Tuesday night because Arsenal are seconds away from a fantastic victory against Real Madrid. Thoroughly well-deserved. What, 2 amazing goals from Declan Rice. So if something happens tomorrow, unfortunately, we won't be covering it. So knowing our luck, Kieran, you know what day Man City. It's going to be tomorrow, first thing in the morning, 10 o'clock. The Premier League say, I tell you what, just once, just for the price of football, let's put the news out in the morning, give them a bit of time, and we won't be able to blink and do it. Although the news we're most interested in, Kieran, is there a duckling update? Yes,
all 4 ducklings are in good humour. They are incredible. I sort of went, oh Jesus, this is a disaster. They are so ridiculously cute as well. We put them in the sun for a bit yesterday, and they just huddled up together and practically purring with delight.
For the benefit of the court, Mr. Kieran Maguire is currently doing an impression of a duckling huddling up to the sun. Also, I wouldn't, if I was a duckling being looked after by Finlay, I wouldn't start purring. I mean,
that's a good idea.
He's being restrained enough as it is without them doing cat noises, I have to say. I was just so relieved, Kim, when you said all 4. That's all I needed to know. All 4 still there. An update on 2 big stories, Kieran. First of all, Sheffield Wednesday and the players' salaries.
Yes, the good news is that the club has confirmed that all players have now been paid for March. My concern at this time of year is that clubs have had all of their money. That they won't necessarily have had much season ticket money for 25, 26. And if they have, they end up robbing Peter to pay Paul in using next year's season ticket money to go and pay the salary. But March, April and May tend to be the worst months in terms of clubs struggling to find the cash. The reasons given by Dejon Chansiri, they ring fairly hollow when you do listen to them. It's always the same. Money. I was expecting money to come in from source X and it didn't materialise. When your payroll is due, and if you can't organise yourself, that does not reflect well on the people concerned.
I think Reading fans, Kieran, will take their good news where they can find it. As a really good piece in The Observer that I didn't actually read till after we recorded yesterday, but a good but pessimistic piece about the Reading situation. But there is at least some good news from the EFL for those Reading fans who are, I imagine, desperately worried at the moment.
It's sort of good news in the sense that the EFL have given Dai Yonga a 14-day stay of execution. So he now has to relinquish control of the club by the 22nd of April. Now, whether there's been any response from him to the EFL, because he is a fairly elusive individual, and I know this won't be of any consolation to Reading fans. Reading Football Club's not his biggest concern at present. He has substantial debts which are unpaid, and I'd urge people who are interested in this subject to look at the Twitter account of Mike Gow, who's done a very, very thorough analysis as to where we are, and quite a scary one as well. There are an awful lot of unpaid or claims of unpaid debts by Dai Yonga to his creditors. Where does this leave the club? As we said when this story first broke, there are three options. Either a new owner could be put in place if a deal can be sorted. B, the club goes into administration. Or C, the club directors say we can't fulfil our fixtures. Now, I guess the 2-week stay of execution pushes that third option, which we always said was the least likely one, more into abeyance. I was looking at the numbers, but I was also, when I read Mike Gow's thread, if I was a prospective bidder for Reading Football Club, I would be very reluctant to go ahead and take on the club in its present form, because you simply don't know who has any mortgages, who has any outstanding issues for some of the assets of the club. And therefore, does that make administration more attractive? And people might say, well, surely that's counterproductive, because Reading are having a pretty, given all of the trials and tribulations.
Amazing.
What they're doing on the pitch has been superb. Good chance of playoffs. But if they do go into administration, automatic 15-point penalty, which would, of course, knock them out of the playoff places. And then that means that the chances of returning to the championship would be diminished. At the same time, putting on my cold, shark-like investor eyes, would I be prepared to take that in the knowledge that if it goes into administration, I'm just acquiring the assets, and all of the problems relating to the crossover between Dai Yonga and the club, they're going to be the problems of the administrator. And at least I'd have a clean bill of health in terms of what you're acquiring. If you buy the club as it is, you get all of the assets and you get all of the debts, and we don't know what those debts are. And as far as the governance of the club is concerned, I think it's fair to say that I've had, which I'll politely describe as mixed reports. And therefore, would I be confident as a prospective buyer of getting a list of what is owed to whom, especially in terms of mortgages, outstanding loans, and so on, I'm not sure I would feel overconfident. So that's why, as much as I would loathe this to be the case in so many ways, from an investment point of view, could it be that administration is probably the lesser of two evils? But from an on the pitch point of view, you want the club to be sold.
I think they had 16,000 in on Saturday, which I think is their record crowd of the season, which is a fantastic effort from their fans. The Observer is arguing, Kieran, that one of the public debts, that one of the debts that we know is owed, is the biggest part of the problem, and that is that Rob Couhig is demanding the money back that he put into the club when he thought he was going to buy it, and is possibly suing for potential loss of earnings and profit that he may have made if he had bought the club and got them promoted.
That's right. I believe that Rob Couhig was repaid that loan.
Right, okay.
From the Michael Elise sell-on clause. But at the same time, he appears to be saying, if I had bought Reading Football Club, I could have made some money by now. And because I got so far down the line, and what he's claiming is that, as far as he was concerned, he'd shook on a deal with Dai Yonga, but as a lawyer, you should know until it's been signed, it's a deal ain't a deal. So he certainly does appear to be a complication. I know Derby fans don't have the highest of opinions of Rob Couhig, because when Derby County were in administration, he put in a claim for compensation relating to Derby should have had a points deduction earlier, and that would have prevented Wycombe Wanderers from being relegated. I've been told from some of one of our secret lawyers that some deal was agreed. So we take that on board. Could he be trying to do something similar here? Rob Couhig will do what he considers to be best for his own interests, and everybody acts in self-interest here. And I'm not saying that that's good or bad, because we act in self-interest on a daily basis.
I understand, Kieran, one or two of our secret lawyers may have been at the event you were taking part in today. Did they have some kind of bag over their face? Were they making sure that they couldn't be revealed?
There was a code word. There was a code word.
Okay. I'm chuckling already, Kieran, because it's Donald Trump's tariffs. Now, Kieran, I don't want to come across as one of those people Donald Trump described today as panicans. I don't want to be a panican. I would like to know where Donald Trump thinks the island of Panica is situated in the world, and he's probably wondering why he hasn't put a massive 25% tariff on them, or indeed on Narnia, which is, the only country left he hasn't put a tariff on. But they are going to have, they're going to have a knock-on effect on everything, Kieran, but they're certainly having an effect on football, aren't they?
I think they are. If you take a look at the share price of Manchester United, it's listed in New York. So I was talking about contagion on many occasions beforehand, and Manchester United has caught part of that. So my concerns with football are, in terms of things such as ticket sales, the football industry is a service industry. So in theory, the TV deals, they should be fine. But what happens if we go into some form of global recession on the back of this? And as a result of that, people start cancelling their subscriptions. So, football, as much as we love football, it's still deemed to be a luxury. If you've lost your job, if you've got uncertainty, is this going to drive traffic towards the dodgy Fire Stick alternatives, which are cheaper for some people? Possibly it might. We've got the Premier League Summer Series taking place in the United States. is this going to have an impact on ticket sales there? Because will American consumers who now starting to get quite twitchy about the state of their economy, and they've got a list of priorities as to what they're going to see this summer. And football prices there are ridiculous. I know when I was in Philadelphia a couple of years ago watching the summer series, I think I paid $120, $130 for a ticket. And this is ultimately for a pre-season friendly. So, it was a glorified training session, as we all know. What about issues such as merchandise? Well, there will be a hit. It won't be a huge hit for the likes of Nike and Adidas. The kits are manufactured in Asia, and some of the tariffs which have been imposed by President Trump are, I think, for Vietnam, Cambodia, I think we're probably talking mid-40s%. And whilst we make sort of somewhat sniffy remarks about them being produced in sweatshops and then sold off at huge markups, even if you're importing them for $10 to $15, you add 40% onto that, and it's an extra $5 or $6, which starts to make things more difficult. My main concern, however, is we have an awful lot of American investment in English football. And if I was a successful American investor, and you've got to acknowledge that the American economy over the course of the last decade has far outpaced that of Europe and the UK, you also have to say that wealth has very much been concentrated in the hands of the top 1 or 2%. And I'm not making a party political. This is an economic observation. If those people who have therefore on the back of that said, I've got some fun money and I'm going to invest in a soccer club, they're now looking at their portfolio of wealth and saying, I've just taken a huge hit. My wealth is down substantially, especially if they were tech-based and so on. If you take a look at, I think it was Thomas Sandgaard, the former owner of Charlton, who was twice booked to appear on The Price of Football.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that this is POF karma, but if you take a look at his organisation, he subsequently sold out to Charlie Methven. The value of his company, which I think is something like ZYXI, that's down about 85, 90% over the course of the last few months. So that's taken an absolute hammering. If I was that investor, and previously I'd been willing to subsidise a club, 50 grand a week, 100 grand a week, 200 grand a week, whatever it's going to be, I'm now looking at my list of priorities, and all of a sudden this little UK venture is no longer a bit of fun. And could that therefore mean that American investors will start either significantly reducing the budgets or trying to find a way out of their investments in UK clubs by selling them, and that could have a detrimental impact on the price of the clubs, with the exception of Chelsea's women's team, of course.
When you think about super successful businesses that are selling through the roof like Heinz or Mattel, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But there's a secret. The business behind the business, making selling simple for them and buying simple for their customers. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout as Heinz and Mattel. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/promo to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/promo.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Yeah, which we'll come on to in a moment. I mean, just this afternoon, Donald Trump imposed 104% tariffs on China. And we know a lot of merchandising, giant foam fingers, that sort of thing, the stuff I don't approve of, is made in China. So that's going to have a knock-on effect on it. And again, there's no doubt that the World Cup will take place next year, but it's going to take place in a mood of acrimony and discomfort. And I imagine, as we've said before, border disputes about letting fans in and out, isn't it? So there's no reason why football should escape these things, because the world hasn't escaped them. But this is a watch this space one. Now, our next story, Kieran, it says here that a bear has been spotted going into the woods looking for the toilet. And that bear has a newspaper under his arm from, I believe it's the Vatican Gazette, and it's confirmed that the Pope is indeed a Catholic. That's on the front page, and on the back page it says that somehow Barcelona have failed La Liga's FFP regulations.
Quelle surprise.
Absolutely so.
Yes, the Liga has taken a look at the Machiavellian way, I think it's fair to say, that Barcelona had managed to claim that Dani Olmo and Pau Victor could be recruited. Now, as you know, I am technically a chartered accountant, and I have done my share of auditing back when I was a callow youth. The thing about auditing is that you don't make very much money in the first year or two of the job, because you don't really know much about the company. So therefore, you tend to do it as a bit of a loss leader, and you're finding out about how the systems work and who's in charge here, and you're writing up loads and loads of boring papers. But that's the nature of auditing and accounting. And you make your money sort of further down the line. And normally there's a good relationship between client and auditor. So, if you like me, I like you, we just carry on that relationship year after year after year. What we've seen with Barcelona is that Barcelona have been through 3 sets of auditors, one of whom lasted 4 days. And in that 4 days, it just so happened that they managed to sign off the paperwork which said, Barcelona, big thumbs up, they've generated enough revenue to sign these 2 players, to register these 2 players. So they sent it off to La Liga, and I think these players have started playing. And then the new auditors came in a few days later, and La Liga went, I don't know what the Spanish is for Jimmy Hill, but they were stroking their chin, and they investigated what Barcelona had been up to, and they've effectively said this looks not quite right, and therefore have reversed it. So we now have this situation where Laporta, the Barcelona boss, is claiming, of course, that it's all some sort of conspiracy. Real Madrid are also claiming that there's this conspiracy against them by the nasty referees that don't give them a penalty every time they just appeal for a penalty. But what's been happening to Barcelona has been, if you're heading for an iceberg, change course, and Barcelona have just put their foot on the accelerators in terms of everything that they've done. And this is, for me, has always been the big failing of the model that we have, the model that they have in Spain, in the sense that you vote for a president to run the club for a period of time. And what are you going to put in your manifesto? Are you going to put in your manifesto, I, as your president, am going to ensure that Barcelona operates within the limits, that we make sure that we abide by the rules, we're sustainable? Or are you going to say, we're going to sign anything that moves? And we're going to we're going to shower you with gifts in the form of shiny new baubles, expensive football players. Well, this is populism. And we've seen how populism doesn't necessarily work, because once that person is in power, they forget all of their promises and they start making dumb decisions. I'm not saying it ever happens outside of football, by the way.
Yeah.
Because that would be a cynical view of the world, and I'm not a cynic.
Yeah. Talking of shiny baubles, and Kylian Mbappe is obviously more than that. He's one of the best players in the world. But one of the highlights of the TV coverage this evening of the Arsenal Real Madrid game was watching the mascots lose their shit. This is the only way I can explain it. When they're in the tunnel waiting to go on, and Mbappe comes out, and just remember those old girls' hockey games at Wembley that used to be on once a year? There'd be 80,000 shrieking. This is exactly, it reached decibel levels like that. And God love him, fair play to him. He high-fived all of them. We're just struggling to tie down a date with this woman, Kieran, because she's exceptionally busy. But she has agreed to come on, and she is the La Liga executive, basically who's in charge of the Spanish football's FFP regulations. And she's coming on to speak to us, which I'm really looking forward to. I imagine she'll be reluctant to speak about individual clubs, but we're going to give it a go, Kieran. We will.
Absolutely.
We will give it. It might be that she's only too pleased. In fact, if we tell her it doesn't go out in Spain, or it certainly doesn't go out in Catalonia, she might only be too pleased to have an opportunity to kick her shoes off and say, "Oh, for the love of what a bunch of rat bags there." We'll find out. Kieran. And talking a further update on where the Bears go to the toilet, and is the Pope a Catholic situation, Kieran. Perhaps you could update us on where Chelsea are with UEFA's limits on financial losses.
Yes. Chelsea announced, I think it was something like a £70 million profit in their accounts, and everybody went, blimey O'Reilly, that's impressive. But as you know, the devil is in the detail. And first of all, you've got to give Chelsea a huge amount of credit for their ability to monetize the transfer market in terms of making profits. So they made a huge amount of profit from player sales in 23-24. But their underlying loss, and by underlying loss, what I mean by here, it's the money that Chelsea made from the TV deal, ticket sales, and commercial. And remember, they didn't have a front of shirt deal available for the whole year. That was only a part year. Less the wage cost, less our very good friend amortization, of course, and then your day-to-day overs. On the basis of my calculations, Chelsea lost £222 million. Probably about 2/3 of that they recouped through player sales. And then there was £197.5 million worth of profit, and it just said sale of subsidiaries. So you go into this in a bit further detail, and you find that Chelsea's women's team was sold for £200 million. Now, I'm really torn on this particular issue, because Chelsea's women's team are brilliant. They are by far the best team in the WSL. They're doing really well in Europe. They have invested in players. They bought players. They're paying good wages for players, and so on. And that has to be kept separate from the issue of selling the club for £200 million. So I did a bit of analysis, and it all sort of kicked off on social media. So when I said, let's take a look at Newcastle United, who were sold for 1.5 times the price of Chelsea's women's team. They were sold for £300 million a couple of years ago. Newcastle are being watched by 54,000 people every single week. Chelsea are averaging 4,000. Some of their attendances even in the last 4 to 6 weeks, I think they had about 2,500 for one match at Kingsmeadow. Kingsmeadow is not the same as St James's Park. Kingsmeadow is not the same as Stamford Bridge. Now, when Chelsea women play at Stamford Bridge, they do get much higher crowds. You're getting into the teens in terms of thousands. So you can't it looks really strange. Newcastle, when they were sold, they generated £150 million in total revenue from the broadcast, from the commercial, from the ticket sales. Chelsea generated 11 million. So if you work it out, and this is sort of one of the things we do in the World of Finance, you say, okay, how much was the club sold for? How much money does it bring in? For Newcastle, for every £1 that the club generated, it was sold for 2. So it brought in 150, it was sold for 300. So we call that a multiplier. If you applied that to Chelsea, multiplier of 2, that would give a figure of 22 million. Now, you could say, and I think you could validly say, yeah, look, there's a lot of scope for growth in the women's game. And Chelsea's men's team went for a multiplier of 5. Manchester United's men's team went for a multiplier of around about 7 when Offshore Gym bought them last year. So let's apply that to Chelsea. That would give a value of, say, somewhere between 50 to 70 million, 50 to 75 million. Again, a long way short of 200 million. Also, when you look at Newcastle, the new owners would be saying, if we get this right, we get into the Champions League, we get into Europe. How much is Europe worth? That's worth another £100 million a year. Could we say the same for Chelsea's women's team? I don't think you can. And this is not a criticism of the women's game. It is a different sport. It has got different parameters. It's got different financial KPIs. So that's why, for me, the figure looks vastly too high. I don't think the Premier League has helped itself here because it's done a bit of a reverse ferret. Chelsea had to submit their accounts to the Premier League by the 31st of December. The Premier League then, in theory, had 14 days to respond to that. Was there anything that we're unhappy with? If so, is there going to be an investigation? This is where transparency really would help matters. If you contrast what we've seen in terms of Chelsea, where there's been nothing from the Premier League and there's been nothing from the football club, at least we know with Leicester said, we've not been charged, but we've not been charged. And the Premier League put out a fairly similarly, very carefully worded statement, i.e., we're taking a look at what's been going on here. Now, Martin Ziegler, who's an excellent journalist at the Times, I think he was one of the first people to say, Premier League's still taking a look at this. So why are we finding this out at the start of April? With 2.5 months. If I was one of Chelsea's rivals, I think I would be fairly livid because Chelsea could now qualify for the Champions League on the basis of these accounts. And the purpose of the changes in the Premier League rules was to allow for an in-season charge and punishment if found guilty. So what we could now have is Chelsea qualify for the Champions League. If they subsequently are charged and found guilty of overstating the fair market value of the women's team, points deduction doesn't come in until next season, if found guilty. Remember, innocent until guilty. And that means that another club has missed out on participation in Europe. So it all starts kicking off again. Would that club therefore sue Chelsea for loss of revenue? And we get into a Burnley versus Leeds, or Sheffield United versus West Ham over Tevez, or Middlesbrough and Wycombe Wanderers over Derby County. It's a mess, and it's not an easy decision. It's not an easy investigation to come to an answer to, but the lack of transparency and the lack of people being upfront is certainly not helping. One of the things which Nick DeMarco says time and time again, hearings should be heard in public so that people can form their own opinions. And we're all barroom lawyers, and it doesn't mean that we're getting things right, but at least those people who abide by conspiracy theories, and I was listening to some people in recent times saying, oh yeah, this is happening, I know for certain. Well, at least if everything's being heard in public, you can say, we can refute what you've said. What we've got now here is secrecy, opaque behaviour and uncertainty. And I don't think that's good for the game. And it certainly doesn't help the Premier League in its opposition to the independent regulator.
It doesn't, Kieran, and it's a mess, but it's an easily avoidable mess, it seems to me, because all you have to do is do what other countries do, other football leagues do across the world in their FFP calculations. You have a panel that establishes a fair market value before the accounts are published. And the panel goes, that's too high, and the club has to accept it. They either appeal it or they accept it. When you get into the situation that the accounts are published and then somewhere along the line the Premier League might go, perhaps that's too high, we'll have to investigate, that's when you get the problems, and that's when the lawyers... To be fair to Chelsea, though, Kieran, they have acted as an inspiration for at least one other Premier League club here, haven't they?
That's right. Again, I think this was Martin... I think a story in the Times. Aston Villa are considering selling their women's team to help comply with PSR. If you take a look at Aston Villa's balance sheet, the club has got no infrastructure assets. It's got no players for which it has paid a transfer fee. It is owed some money. Now, often I will say to people, if you're trying to value a business through looking at the balance sheet, if you've got infrastructure assets, that's what they cost. You might have bought the stadium 30 years ago. What's it worth today? It could be worth considerably more because we know what happens to property prices. You might have some players that you bought and you bought really well. They've gone up in value. And for all I know, that Villa's homegrown players could be worth a lot of money. But it's got nothing down for those. If I'm owed £100,000, that's worth £100,000. It's not, somebody's not going to pay me 120 grand for a debt worth. So it's got debts of 200 grand, and it's got cash. Okay, well, what is cash worth? What is a pound worth? It's worth a pound. So that's all of the assets that Aston Villa women have. If they subsequently come up with a value of, let's say, 80, 100 million pounds, what are we effectively saying is one of two things. First of all, this is a get out of jail free card being utilised by clubs, just as the academy player swaps that we saw in June 24 was a get out of jail free card. This one's slightly different, that you can only use it once. And secondly, that the rules of the Premier League are not fit for purpose if they are genuine about trying to create a sustainable industry, because selling things to yourself simply does not work. If I take, you saw my picture of my granddaughter. If I sell that piece of paper to myself for £1,000, I'm not £1,000 better off. My left hand is better off by £1,000, but my right hand is worse off by £1,000. And me as a whole, given that I've got two hands at one point in time, I'm no better or worse off. And that's effectively what we're doing with these transactions.
If just to avoid any misunderstanding, Kieran, I would avoid telling the Baroness that you're selling a photograph of your granddaughter to anyone.
Well, it was only to me.
Well, no, even to you. Just in case she gets hold of the wrong end of the stick.
No, it was a picture that she drew of me.
Oh, a picture. Oh, that's different.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. She'd drawn it at school. So therefore, for me, it's got great sentimental value.
Did you fit on the paper? Because you're quite a tall lad. Did she fit you on the paper? Have you got?
Yeah, she did. Yeah, I'll show it to you one day.
Yeah, good. Do you know what? I think it's time we ended the shilly-shallying, Kieran. The Villa need punishing. What I would do is throw them out of the FA Cup. Simple as that. That'll teach them. And I'm sure we can find a reason to throw Forest and Man City out of it as well while we're about it. And while we're still on Chelsea, Kieran, we have spoken about our reservations, shall we say, when the owner of a club is also linked to a ticketing website. And those reservations have been underlined this week, haven't they, with Chelsea?
Yes. Under the reporting rules, if you are a related party of a company, you must disclose any transactions, loans, sales, purchases. And it turns out that Chelsea received £93,000 from Vivid Seats. This is a ticketing website linked to Todd Boehly because Todd Boehly is a shareholder. So he doesn't run the company on a day-to-day basis, doesn't run Vivid Seats. But this is a huge conflict of interest. If he is going to benefit from the profits of Vivid Seats, and Chelsea are going to benefit from these sales by Vivid Seats, and Vivid Seats is not an authorised seller of tickets, somewhere along the line, something wrong is taking place. Why isn't the Premier League doing anything? Or is it doing something? And once again, we don't get to hear about it because it's all done behind closed doors. And the secrecy in football these days, they are our clubs. They're not. Todd Boehly is a custodian. He is not the owner. It's the boys and girls in the shed who've been going there for the last 40 or 50 years. It's the kids who admire the Chelsea players, who want to be the next Cole Palmer. They are the owners of Chelsea, and Todd Boehly really ought to know that.
At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can even finish the bachelor's degree you started in 22 months for $20,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by pace, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Business. How can you free up your team from time-consuming office tasks? Amazon Business empowers leaders to not only streamline purchasing, but better support their teams so they can focus on strategy and growth. Free up your teams and focus on your future. Learn more about the technology, insights, and support available at amazonbusiness.com.
Well, we've got 2 stories on the Premier League, Kieran. Firstly, our interview this week is with a very nice chap called Joe Foster, who's the international marketing manager at Bøder Glimt, successful Norwegian club, who basically, when we mentioned the finances of the Premier League, laughed. Well, he'll be laughing on the other side of his face, Kieran, when he realises they've gone up by 5%.
And 5% of a very big number to begin with.
Yes, indeed.
So the Premier League's total revenues, and this is the Premier League, this is the Football Association Premier League Limited. So it's not the 20 clubs, it's the Premier League as we know it. It's Richard Masters and his merry gang. That's gone up to £3.6 billion. There's a lot of zeros in a billion, it has to be said. Congratulations. That's absolutely fantastic. It's hugely successful. What we also see is that the Premier League's wage bill went up by double digits. The average cost of employing an individual person is now £143,000. The Premier League is taking on more and more people. Now, if the regulator had an average staff cost of £143,000 and the number of employees went up by 15% in a year, can you imagine the reaction of club owners? And yet they're silent about this. So I'm not going to go on a regulator crusade here, but one of the things I observe is that if the regulator does its job well, then there's no need for the Premier League to keep taking on more staff to do what appear to be very expensive tasks. The other interesting point for me was that if you looked at the Premier League's overall overheads, they shot up. I tried to get an answer from the Premier League is to say, how much of those are legal costs? And they said, go boil your brains, Maguire. We're not going to tell you. But yes, general overheads have gone up, but one would have to say a significant increase in overheads. What's likely to drive that? The conclusion I have reached is that legal costs must be a very significant contribution. And as much as it was great to be in the company of some extremely smart minds, we talk about money leaking from the football industry to agents. Well, money also leaks from the football industry to bankers, to private equity organisations, to consultants, to accountants and lawyers. And that money is not going back into football. So those costs being borne by the Premier League are very significant indeed. It would be, again, sensible for them to say, because otherwise people will speculate. This is how much it cost us, and we're doing this because we are there to try to protect the integrity of the game. Take that. That's our role. We have to incur these costs. And actually, I think that people would turn around and say, yeah, okay, you're doing your job. We've actually got respect for you for that.
Mm. You mentioned, you confused me there by mentioning integrity and then take that in the same sentence, which certainly when it comes to... No, we're talking about a room full of 200 lawyers. Let's not talk about take that and their tax situation. As if they didn't pay it, is my understanding. As if by magic, Kieran, our penultimate story is indeed about the Premier League legal bill, because there's been a lot of discussion. We think that 50 million is what it's cost the Premier League so far in the last year, but certainly more than one newspaper are reporting that they've lost another £20 million to lawyers after losing that first part of the dispute with Man City over sponsorship rules. And you can't help but thinking, if they lose the second part of that case and they lose 115, that 50 plus 20 million, it's going to go up to about 110 million. And that's when you start thinking, that's untenable, Kieran, isn't it?
It is. So again, I think this is a story which has come from the Times. I'm not sure this is the case, but Manchester City, I think they certainly won on points. There's a case for saying that they won within 15 rounds. In terms of ATP 1, which effectively voided the rules which were created by the Premier League purely coincidentally within 3 or 4 weeks of Newcastle United being bought by PIF in terms of associated party transactions. Could Manchester City therefore recover its legal costs? We don't know enough about what was agreed between the two parties, but it certainly is a possible. And again, if I was an owner or a chief executive of one of those middle-class clubs, and let's be honest, that's where the clubs that we support are in terms of their position in the Premier League, I would be looking at myself in the mirror and going, okay, if this is 100, 120, 140, divide that by 20, that's my share. That's costing me £5 million, now £6 million, now £7 million. And £7 million as a proportion of Palace's or Brighton or Bournemouth's total income is a far greater percentage than the same cost to the elite clubs who were the drivers behind this. They were certainly the clubs that were putting the pressure. I've heard from more than one person connected to a non-Super League 6 Premier League club. Actually, we didn't like what Manchester City did, but if it's going to cost us £7 million, frankly, we don't care. Because we don't see ourselves as competing with Manchester City season after season. We know where they are, we know where we are. So this just appears to be an unnecessary cost for us. And we don't like people to get away with things. If Manchester City have got away with something, for all we know, they could be successful in all of this. And if they are not successful, I think that the mood music from the event I was talking tonight is cancel all holidays, cancel all weekends, cancel all evenings, because the potential for some form of financial redress against Manchester City from those clubs who feel that they have suffered as a result through losing out on Champions League places, through losing out on sponsor bonuses, through losing out on Premier League titles, FA Cup holders, European places, all of these types of things, is going to be a tsunami of legal cases. potentially.
You know, Kieran, reluctant as I sometimes am to praise the Premier League, it could be that they are playing a very clever long game here. Remind me how much it is, Kieran, that Premier League clubs get for each place they finish in the table.
It's about £3.4 million.
Exactly. So £3.4 million. So 2 places pays off your £7 million share of the legal bill. What that means is that clubs like Bournemouth, Brighton and Palace are encouraged to keep going till the end of the season to see how far up the table they can get to cover the legal bill, thus making sure all games are still competitive, thus making sure that the broadcasters are happy and people around the world aren't watching any boring games. How do you think that? What do you think of that?
That's what Baldrick would be impressed by that level of cunning, Kevin, if you don't mind me saying so.
I just made me laugh when I thought of that, because the idea of the Premier League coming out with that plan is just preposterous, isn't it? They might do now. I'll invoice them. What's Richard Masters' address? I'll invoice him. This last story, Kieran, surely, you know how reluctant I am sometimes to say that a story is unequivocally good news, but this one surely is unequivocally good news for women's football in the UK and the economy.
Yeah, congratulations to the Football Association. Congratulations to the football associations of Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, because the Women's World Cup is coming home in 2035. And in addition, it's going to be a biggie, 48 teams. Now, that'll be a fantastic opportunity to see the game. And here's a suggestion. If you don't like women's football, don't watch it and leave it for the rest of us, because I still maintain that going to watch the Lionesses win the Euros a couple of years ago was an absolutely brilliant experience, fantastic football, fantastic day out. And you know what? Everybody got on, as opposed to the slightly less gracious behaviour of when England's men's team got to the Euros the previous year, which involved setting light to flares up your arse.
Yeah, which has now been turned into a play.
That's it.
Yeah, says something about this country. Really, I don't think it's an ironic sideways look at the state of English football either. I think it's just genuinely celebrating the life of a man who stuck a flare up his arse. I mean, part of me says, Kieran, and I don't know if I should say this out loud, but women's football must be doing better than we thought, Kieran. If they can afford enough money to pass that on to Infantino to get the World Cup in 2035, I'm sure it was a fair. Well, let's just say, thank God Saudi Arabia didn't want to host it, because that might have been different. But it's a brilliant good news story to end on. Or we may not end on it, Kieran, because producer guy may take that last bit out for legal reasons. Who knows? Thank you to everyone who's joined the Price of Football Club. If you'd like to join the club too, then please go to our website, priceoffootball.com. I know a lot of you already have done, and we really do appreciate it. Certainly our monthly Q&A on Zoom. We're only into our third one, but it's getting bigger and bigger, and it's thoroughly enjoyable to do. And it's lovely to meet all of you. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, on our weekly Monday questions pod, then email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Tuesday questions pod, it got moved, I forgot. And don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter, X, find us on YouTube. And if you'd like to buy one of our excellent books, or even that Price of Football t-shirt, you can find all the details on that website, priceoffootball.com. We will be back on Friday with that interview with Joe Foster from Bordeaux Glimt. And if you don't want to listen to that, we'll be back on Tuesday with our next questions pod. In the meantime, I hope you have a lovely weekend. I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you to all club members for getting in contact. Remember, you do have a dedicated Q&A line as well for our additional show that we do on answering your questions. And that's we're trying to offer as much as we can, as well as keeping it as free to air for everybody else, because there is subscription fatigue and things are tough for everybody as well. I'm also delighted to say that our names, Kevin, have been spotted in toilets in Rotherham.
I know. Well, Kieran, this may come as no surprise to you, but my name's been spotted in toilets all over the country, especially after gigs. But that did make me chuckle, the fact that somebody took a photograph of our poster that's been stuck up in a toilet in Rotherham somewhere. But if we get 2 extra tickets out, I suppose, Kieran, it depends what height it was stuck up at, as to however many tickets we get. But in these day and age, Kieran, you take your tickets sales where you can. That's what I say.
That's right. So we are coming to Rotherham on April the 28th. Tickets are just £18 each. If you look at the show notes here, or if you go to Rotherham's website, you can get hold of your tickets. There are still a few available. We were hoping to get somebody from Leeds United, but they're now playing Bristol City that night. We were hoping to get somebody from Sheffield, but I think they're away somewhere. But we will try and make sure that we get some. Or if not, you just have to go and listen to Day and Maguire talking even more about the latest stories that are taking place in the world of football, as well as answering your questions. So it is a genuinely great show. We absolutely love doing it. We love meeting you all as well. So please come along. If you want to support the price of football in another way, pop along to your app. If you've got a few seconds to spare, just give us a review. It helps us with the algorithms. Whilst Apple's share price is still above zero, we can still get on that particular app. Not far away these days. Doesn't matter what you say. You could even say you'd rather see it hosted by Claire Grogan and Kathy Burke, and I would just sit starry-eyed listening to those two for hours upon end.
So you've mentioned Claire Grogan to a man of a certain age there now. That's it. I'm done. Kathy Burke is one of the funniest, rudest people I've ever met in my life.
Yes,
she's quite the potty mouth, but she's very, very funny. I once found myself going up to Scotland for a gig, and I sat down on the plane, and this very nice young woman I sat next to said hello to me on my first name, and I realised it was Claire Grogan, and I think she was trying to make conversation, Kieran. I couldn't get the words out. Basically, bye everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.
This is Ali Maxwell from Not the Top 20 podcast, the number one EFL podcast covering the Championship, League One and League Two. Every Monday, our show is teeming with talking points and surprise results. These leagues and the characters within them are unpredictable and constantly entertaining in their nature. And we never have to speak about VAR. Subscribe to Not the Top 20 podcast on your preferred podcast platform and dive into the best, most in-depth EFL analysis around.